Hey, I'm John Lagomarsino, and this is I Should Start a Podcast, a show from Anchor about the ins and outs of podcasting. Today, we're going to switch things up a little bit. A lot of you have sent in voice messages over the last few weeks with really specific questions, and I thought it would be helpful to take a break from the normal format and do a Q&A here for this episode. So let's just hop in and listen to the first question.
Hi, my name is Rashida Jackson over at the Focus Friday podcast. A question that I have, though, is how would one who does not have an already established audience promote their podcast on Anchor? I don't have a big audience. The audience I do have, I haven't really let them know about the podcast, and I did that just to see how far I could get in Anchor. And I wanted to know what are the different tips that you guys give in connecting with other listeners to feed into our podcast and to grow our listener base.
Hey, Rashida, thanks for the question. Growing your audience can be kind of slow, and it can be kind of an ongoing job. It always is for any show. When your goal is to grow an audience. So some things that you could do on the Anchor platform specifically are things like asking your audience to send in voice messages that you then incorporate into your show. I'm doing this right now, really. It kind of gives your audience an incentive to be a part of the show and probably motivated to share it with others. Obviously, also make sure your show is the best that it can possibly be. It sounds pretty obvious, but the better your show is, the more people want to listen to it and the more they will share it. You also mentioned in your message, though, that you have refrained from sharing the show with your existing audience. And I'm kind of curious about why that is. That's actually a really good way to start getting an audience, is to share it with the people who are already looking to you for, let's call it, content. If you've got people who already care about what you're saying, those are probably your most valuable audience members. And those are people who will be interested in your show and interested in sharing it with other people that they think would enjoy your podcast. So I would say, don't be afraid to start, tweeting and posting on Facebook about your podcast, whether you're sharing the link directly to your Anchor profile or to Apple Podcasts, wherever your audience is listening to podcasts, make sure that they can and leverage the people that are already paying attention to what you have to say.
Hey man, Cody Zabo here, new to the Anchor app. I actually really like it, but I do have a question though. I'm trying to connect with as many people about my topics as possible, and it's on politics. I would really like to know if you know anybody that could help me out, or if you just know somebody who's into the same topic as me and can hop on a podcast with me, man. Again, my name's Cody Zabo, and love the app. Thanks, man.
Hey, Cody. So since you're using Anchor anyway, there's actually a very easy way to connect with other people who want to talk about the same topic. It's called co-hosts, and if you open up the app, you'll see a bunch of floating topics. If you tap one of those topics, we will try to match you with another person using the app to have a recorded conversation about that topic. If you don't see politics on the list, you can type it in yourself or pick it from a drop down there. I'm sure plenty of people are out there wanting to talk about politics. And I think you could find some really interesting, diverse points of view from just the mass of people using the app. Aside from that, though, try tweeting or posting to Facebook or starting a Reddit thread with links to your show. Get people to listen to it and kind of figure out where you're coming from and explicitly solicit. Say, I'm looking for guests to talk about this. Do any of my followers have an expertise in, I don't know, congressional politics or something? Find communities where they're already talking about those things. Explain that you want to give your guests a voice on these topics, and find the people where they are. So a few people sent in kind of variations of the same question, and I want to play a few of those right now and tackle this one.
Hey, my name is John Michael. I wanted to chime in a little bit here because I started podcasting, and as I read more and saw more videos on, how to podcast, they talk about having like a niche subjects and trying to find a niche audience. But how do you find a niche audience when you just want to talk about the things you see every day? You want to talk about different aspects of life. I don't want to just talk about one certain thing,
Hey, John, my name is GX Reyes. one of the questions I had is I've got an interest in a couple different topics, different ideas. So if you could put a podcast out there or some information on how to narrow your topics or what to do if you have interest in multiple topics.
Yeah, so I've been getting questions like this a lot recently, and I want to say a few things about this one. So if you haven't been listening to other episodes, one of the things that I've been saying is find a topic and find a focus for your show and kind of carve out your niche. And I say that because before someone starts listening to your show, they're going to read probably the title, probably a description, probably see the art. And what you're trying to do is get them to cross the threshold and start listening to your show. That's easier to do when you have a clear reason for your show existing and a clear purpose and a clear topic. Now, people make podcasts for all kinds of reasons. When I say to give your show a topic and carve out a niche for your audience, the goal there is to attract an audience, as big an audience and as focused an audience as you can. But not everyone needs to or wants to appeal to a huge audience. Maybe you're making something for your friends, for your family, kind of akin to a personal blog. In that case, there's nothing wrong with podcasting about whatever's on your mind, multiple topics, just what's going on in your life. A podcast is just a container for audio. There's no hard and fast rules about what you need to talk about. That said, if your goal is to attract some kind of audience of strangers, I stick by this. Your show should probably have some kind of focus, some kind of promise you give to the audience that they're going to get something when they subscribe to your show. So for this one, it's about how to make a podcast. I'm not going to start talking about, last night's episode of Westworld, for example. That's just not what the show is about. I also want to say there's no rule that you can't have multiple podcasts. If I wanted to talk about Westworld for an hour, I could start a second podcast about that and probably get a very different audience for that show from the audience for this show. But like I said, people podcast for all kinds of reasons and about all kinds of things. So if what you want to do is just start a daily diary, there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that if your goal is to attract a focused and impassioned audience, that audience is probably going to expect a show to be about something.
So my question is, how do I attract guests to come onto my podcast when I'm very new and I have no episodes up whatsoever? And my podcast will be based around having guests onto my show. And where do I record a podcast if I don't have a proper studio or anything like that? Do I record it? Can I do it in person even though I don't have a studio and it's like in my bedroom or something like that and it's weird for the guests to come there at my house? Or do I just do it over a call? And if I were to do it over a call, how would I record that call and the audio and all that?
Hey, thanks for the question. I think first right off, probably don't invite strangers to record a podcast in your bedroom. I think both of you would be a lot more comfortable in some other setting. But let's back up to the first part of the question, how to actually get guests on your show. We talked a little bit about this in, I think it was episode 4, but it can be tricky and it's kind of, you're in it for the long haul. Reach out to people at first that you know or know a friend of, and just make the pitch for why your show exists and how you're going to be a thoughtful interviewer. Express interest in them. Flattery never hurts. And try to get them on your side, basically. And then after you've got your first couple guests, it'll become easier and easier as time goes on, and you can play your show for those prospective guests as your show gets a better reputation and your show is a proven entity. It'll be easier and easier to get guests. As for where to record, like I said, probably don't do it in your bedroom if you don't know the guest. Even if you do, maybe that's weird. You could try to find a quiet spot somewhere. Maybe they have an office close to you. Maybe you know somebody at the local library who can give you a room somewhere. But then a remote interview is a totally fine way to do something. I actually prefer doing remote interviews in some instances because I can be looking at my notes and not worried about things like eye contact through the whole conversation. If you're using Anchor, you could ask your guest to also be using Anchor, and then you can use something called Record with Friends inside the app to do a remote interview that way. If you want to do it over the phone or over Skype or something, there are apps for both Mac and PC that'll record both ends of a Skype conversation onto your computer so that you can have a clean recording of that. If you want to get really fancy, you can do something we call a double ender, where you call your guest on the phone and each one of you records your end separately. And then later you get them to send their end of the conversation to you and you can sync them up. So you get clean local recordings from both sides of the call. But that's the fancier version. If you're just getting started, I would really recommend using Record with Friends because it's super easy and it requires basically no setup.
Hello, my question is, if this takes 10 hours to edit, what is the monetary gain, or is there just like a financial, not a financial, but an emotional fulfillment that you get out of editing something for 15 minutes, editing something that's going to play for 15 minutes, but you edit it up to 10 hours, and you said sometimes people can do that even longer. 10 hours is a long time, and so I'm wondering, what is the financial gain?
Yeah, this is a big question. I don't think many people get into podcasting with the goal of getting rich. I don't think many people get into most creative enterprises with the goal of getting rich. To me, this is a thing that I love doing, and it's a creative outlet, and I happen to be lucky enough to work somewhere where I can make money doing it. And there are plenty of opportunities once you get an audience and a following to make money off of podcasting. But in terms of why I spend so long editing, why anyone spends so long making really anything creative, is out of just creative fulfillment. Maybe that's not a direct answer to how to make your podcast lucrative, but it's why I started doing it and it's why I still do it. I love storytelling and I love audio and I like communicating this way. And that's, regardless of the money, why I do this at all and why I spend so long editing. And I think if you ask other podcasters why they spend so much time on their shows, they'll give you a pretty similar answer.
Hello, John. It's Patrick, and I have a podcast named We Live on a Planet right here on Anchor Radio that I started in October. And I have a question about artwork. My artwork is just plain. I don't have anything on there of branding that says We Live on a Planet. In one of your past episodes, you were talking about having clear and concise artwork, and mine is not clear and concise because I don't have, like I said, We Live on a Planet on there. Do I change it? Do I tweak it? Do I leave it alone? I'm kind of curious because I started getting a little bit of a following, and I don't want to change what people are used to seeing. So I'm wondering, should I just leave it alone or what to do? I'm looking forward to your advice. Thanks so much.
Hey, yeah. Unless your podcast art has become absolutely iconic and you can't imagine the show without that art, I don't think there's any real downside to replacing the art, updating it, making it more effective and better looking. Your art is a first impression for people. So I would be less concerned with the people who are already listening to your show and more concerned with making a good first impression to people who don't even know they would like your show yet. So I don't think there's anything wrong with replacing the art if you think that there's a better version of it out there. Just know that once you do replace the art, it takes a little bit of time on some platforms for them to update the art and for the feed to catch up. But it will happen once you replace the art. But again, I wouldn't stress about changing the art if what you're doing is an improvement. All right, that was a great batch of questions, some tricky ones, but that's it for now. Thanks so much to everyone who sent a question in. Keep them coming because we'll probably do this again at some point. If you want to drop me a line, just download the Anchor app, search for I Should Start a Podcast, and tap the messages button to shoot me a voice message. Thanks for listening. I Should Start a Podcast is a production of Anchor, the easiest way to make a podcast. You can sign up and start creating at anchor.fm. If you like this show, remember that you can hear it on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, or any app you use to listen to podcasts. And if you like the show, it would be really cool if you left a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show reach new people, which the show is all about, right? My colleague Brendan Bigley produced all of the music in this episode. You can find links to all of his stuff in the show description. Thanks again for listening. I'm John Lagomarcino, and I'll be back really soon with another episode of I Should Start a Podcast. Talk to you then.